is the Second Treatise of Government and a Letter Concerning Toleration by John Locke. So I shall read the back for you guys. There's a little quote at the top in red. I'm going to read that first, and then I'm going to read the description. So, quote, "Man being born to perfect freedom hath by nature a power to preserve his property, that is, his life, liberty, and estate." Locke's Second Treatise of Government, 1689, is one of the greatest classics of political philosophy, widely regarded as the foundational text of modern liberalism. In it, Locke insists on majority rule and regards no government as legitimate unless it has... I have a grog in my throat. Okay. In it, Locke insists on majority rule and regards no government as legitimate unless it has the consent of the people. He sets aside people's ethnicities, religions, and cultures, and envisages political societies which command our assent because they meet our elemental needs simply as human. His work helped to entrench ideas of a social contract, human rights, and protection of property as the guiding principles for just actions and just actions and just societies. Published in the same year, a letter concerning toleration aimed to end Christianity's war of religion and recalled for the separation of church and state so that everyone could enjoy freedom of conscience. Okay, so that's what this is about. I kept thinking about this, and I plan on rereading it. It's been a couple years since I've read some of these things, so I'm a little rusty, so forgive me if I'm not quite sure what's happening, but I still remember that I enjoyed it. So this is my favorite, and I prefer the Second Treatise of Government compared to a letter concerning toleration, although a letter concerning toleration is a good read anyway. Yes. I also think it was important to separate church and state, and this was one of the works that helped to do that. Yeah. I also think that this is a fun little maze on the front, so my favorite book out of all of them thus far I've ever read. This is one of my favorite books of nonfiction that's changed my life. Yeah, it's so good. Up next, we have Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes. This is a little bit of a hard read. It's also a thick monster. There's a lot of pages in here, and it can get a little confusing, but it's still interesting. I like the little artwork on the front. I believe it's sort of the original from when he originally released it. And then, so this guy is Leviathan, but if you look really closely, he's made up of little people, because he's the leader, and then the people make him, democracy. Anyways, there's also a little red quote, and then what it's about, so I'll read that. Quote, "He is that to govern a whole nation must read in himself not this or that particular man, but mankind." So, he does differentiate man from mankind. So it's like the individual and then the collective kind of deal. So let me read it to the back. Leviathan is both a magnificent literary achievement and the greatest work of political philosophy in English. That is debatable, but I will continue. Permanently challenging, it has found new applications and new refutations in every generation. Hobbes argues that human beings are above all concerned with their own individual desires and fears. He shows that a conflict of each against every man can only be avoided by adopting a compact to enforce peace. This involves giving up some of our natural freedom to a sovereign power which will enforce the laws of peace on all citizens. Hobbes also analyzes the subversive forces that threaten to destroy the body politic, Leviathan itself, and return us to the state of war. So the state of war, obviously not great. It's just super interesting. It has some very good points. I will give Hobbes that. Hobbes is a very whether in the 19th century or the 21st. They have formed the basis for many of the political institutions of the West since the late 19th century, tackling as they do the appropriate grounds for protecting individual liberty, the basic principles of ethics, the benefits and the costs of representative institutions, and the central importance of gender equality in society. These essays are central to the liberal tradition, but their interpretation and how we should understand their connections with each other are both contentious. In their introduction, Mark Philip, that's whatever, the introduction's not important. I realize a lot of these books are very liberal. I mean, I went to a liberal university, so that's not very surprising, but I just kind of feel like more liberal and like more left-leaning political philosophy exists, just because conservative or right-winging, like right someone's always speaking, like there's a conversation occurring. It's not just like thoughts being said. Yes. And if you know much about Plato, you know that Socrates was his teacher. So it's interesting that the dialogue is coming from Socrates, but it's being written by Plato. Yeah. I don't want to like go too much into it because I do actually really recommend reading this. It's fun. It's a fun read. And I do agree with the back when it said that it's a cornerstone of Western philosophy. It was well ahead of its time. Its time was in ancient Greece, so obviously, yeah. It's also where philosopher kings like originated from, but I feel like we like don't use it for the same way that he meant it to be used. But yeah, The Republic is a really good read. It's really easy to like. It was translated by Desmond Lee, and I feel like they did a good job at translating because the wording is easy. It's easy to follow. It's still a little fancy dancy, but like it's easy to follow, which I appreciate in an ancient text, you know. It's also just super cool how like such old writings you can still compare them to today, kind of deal. So yeah, The Republic by Plato, top 3 of all the ones I've shown you, honestly. Up next, we're jumping back ahead in history. We've got the basics, political writings by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Rousseau's pretty dope, dude. This is a thin one. However, we have the Discourse on the Sciences and the Arts, the Discourse on the Origin of Inequality, Discourse on Political Economy, on the Social Contract, and the State of War. When I read this, I mainly focused on the social contract. Yes, so I mainly focused on the social contract on this. The social contract is another thing that really changed my view on life, my view on politics and like hierarchies and all that sort of thing. So I shall read you the back. It is scarcely worth reading Rousseau if you want to understand 18th century politics either before or after 1789, but it is certainly worth reading his works if you want to understand ourselves and our own politics, for Rousseau's importance lies, as he always insisted, in his remarkable understanding of the nature of human beings. He, more than any other political theorist, has something important to say about who we are and what politics is for. This substantially revised new edition of Rousseau, The Basic Political Writings, features a brilliant new introduction by David Woodson, whatever. Okay, so that's not important. But the social contract is what's important. It's so important. I don't know if you can tell, but I literally underlined and wrote in this part about the social contract. So you have the social contract, or principles on political right. So the social contract is basically, in easiest terms, you won't kill me and I won't kill you. Basically, like there's a difference between civil society and nature, and we're gonna agree to live in civil society, and I won't kill you or steal from you, or like hurt your wife kind of deal, and you won't do the same to me. And I love the social contract. It's outstanding, honestly. I feel like it's because we definitely live by it without realizing